So these are my 3 key takeaways. It's about structure and consistency, it's about culture and purpose, and it's about leadership and learning. And I think if you do all 3 of these, you won't go far wrong. That's it from me. Thank you.
I'm going to take a seat on the expert lounge sofa.
Thank you very much.
Wow, that was really, really interesting to listen to, and to get an idea of the philosophy behind your organisation. And I think, you know, the way that you're framing some of those aspects in terms of the structure of the company,
Yeah.
And you know the leadership and training and development of staff is really interesting. It puts a different perspective on some of that. So I'm trying to understand. I can see how all of that will work, but does that have an impact? Do you see that in the workplace? Do you see that in the individuals? Does it have an impact on performance and on progression for your staff? What's it like on the ground?
Yeah, I think it does, Carl. I think I don't think there's any shying away from the fact that last year, I think for the whole world, was a tough year. Yeah, I think that's taken its toll on a lot of organisations in terms of being able to give their employees the opportunity to grow and to learn and to see the benefits and reap the benefits of that. But I think organisationally, we really support that, and we are starting to now we're starting to turn the corner a little bit. You know, giving people those Wonder Share Delight days is a real empowering way to enable people to take control of, you know, their own career paths, and to make sure that they're focused on the right areas to learn and grow. And I think, you know, what we see, I think, is when people do use that, and sometimes it's difficult to encourage people to use them. They get so busy on the client engagement that they might be working on. You have to almost encourage them and say, look, take a day out, do something different, go outside your comfort zone, learn a new skill, get involved in that new technology, take part in that competition that we're doing. Yeah, I think these are really powerful things, and I think it's really important for our Andys that they have the opportunity to do that.
I guess I've got a sort of interest really in, you know, because it sounds really sort of, it sounds like a modern place to work. It sounds like it's really engaging for employees, but you will still be faced with some of the challenges that all businesses face with staff, with employees. You know, people might turn up late. They might, you know, they might not fully perform. They might not, you know, strive to achieve the mission that you've set out. How do you go about, you know, in such a structure that's quite vibrant, innovative? Is that more challenging to then sort of challenge individuals when they're not performing?
I think we have to strike that right balance, I think, between that professionalism that is really important, but also having that culture of a workplace that is fun and engaging and exciting. I think one of the important things, and I talked about it, you know, was the squads, and I think, you know, that squad is incredibly close knit. You know, and each squad is led by a squad lead. You know, they are a senior person. They are there to support, coach, and mentor their team, and that squad is multidisciplinary. So it's not just a squad of engineers or a squad of designers or a squad of analysts. You know, there's mixed levels, mixed abilities. And I think that dynamic is really important. And, you know, when we recruit a new Andy, it's really important we put them in the right squad that's going to fit their skills, fit you know, their personality types. We do a lot of work in terms of, you know, when people join, looking at their profile and you know, are they introvert, are they extrovert, making sure that we get the right blend of teams. I think that's really important. And I think you talk about things like performance. I think, yeah, it's that squad structure really. The squad can almost hold themselves to account.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned fun, you know, and I'm a great believer that, you know, whatever your job in whatever organisation, there's no reason why you can't enjoy work and have a lot of fun while you're doing it.
Yeah.
I've had the pleasure of coming to your offices at Dean Clough. It's a fantastic space. What's the thinking behind that space, and what impact, you know, does that have on on the culture of the work that and the workplace there?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say the workplace has changed entirely since COVID. Pre-COVID, our office was a place for people to actually do a lot of their work. They would go in, they would code, they would work together. So much of that stuff now happens at home. For a developer, they have their own setup. They can get their head down, they can put their headphones on at home, and they can churn through the work they need to do. The purpose of our office is entirely changed now. Our new office has 7 meeting rooms, so people are able to collaborate. People are able to, really, use the space in a different way to how we would have used it 5 years ago. The biggest challenge we have is making sure that people use it for the right purpose. What we don't want people is to come in and find there's no space or it's really noisy when they really just want to get their head down and do some work. And I think that blended working model that we've developed, I think it's not unique to Anne, but I think working out what that blended model is for your organisation is really important. I think if you can give people that right work-life balance, they pay you back in terms of how they work. It's really important to give that flexibility.
And I think that links in with what you said about empowerment and trust.
Yeah.
Because actually, when you give people that empowerment and trust, it often, improves engagement and performance, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've got to trust people. I think some organisations may be a bit too close to their employees and try and micromanage. My management style is not really like that. Part of I mentioned the squads. I'm as part of the management team. I'm not in a squad, but what we've called ourselves is Catalyst as a team, and I think that's it's symbolic again of what we're trying to be. We want to be an enabler, be a catalyst, be that support for people to do great work. Clearly, that there's ups and downs with that. If there are performance issues, those need to be nipped in the bud. But I think from my perspective, I would much rather empower people to do what they think is the right thing to do, and go on their own career journey. And I think that framework is really important for me. And my leadership style is very much, I want to empower people rather than control people.
So you've talked about COVID and the impact that's had on the workplace. I guess one of the challenges you've got as a digital employer is the pace of change, and how you keep up with that speed that things are moving, and how innovation is just changing things constantly. How do you keep up with that, and how do you make sure that the organisation's at the forefront of that?
I think there's a number of ways that we kind of look at that. I think we're lucky at Anne that we've got a central team that is constantly looking at innovations in technology. They look at the latest trends. They look at which technologies are on the rise, which technologies are not. Obviously, one of the big things at the moment that everybody's talking about is Gen AI. This is a huge thing, not just in the digital sector, but across society, right? And I think one of the things that we're doing as an organisation just right now, actually, is we're launching a bit of a competition across the entirety of AND for people to bring a team together, build something in Gen AI, innovate in some way. And hopefully some of these ideas will turn into great ways for people to learn, but also they'll turn into great ideas for clients, great ways for us to potentially put something in front of a client we wouldn't necessarily have done if they'd have come and briefed us. I think sometimes there's real value in those proof of concepts. So we do a lot of work like that, which helps to push our boundaries. Equally, if you look at the design space, there's always we try and learn from one sector to another. A lot of work in the public sector that we do is driven by the great GDS standards, the government digital standards that underpin all public services. Trying to bring some of that design thinking into the private sector is a really nice way to cross-pollinate ideas. So,
I mean, I've been into your offices, into your meeting spaces. They are incredibly inspiring. It feels like a great environment to go to work. But the way that you frame in a lot of the sort of the terms that you're using in the organisation. So you squads, your Andes. I think that's all brilliant, but at some point, that won't feel fresh and new. So how do you keep that moving forward, and how do you make sure it stays as fresh as it was on day one.
Yeah, it's a good challenge, and I think our model, our organisational model, is great. And I described how that was designed 10 years ago for where we're at now as an organisation 10 years later. We don't want to evolve it too much. I think that's important for us. I think that there is real value and real uniqueness about that club model that we've developed, and we are very reluctant, I think, to give it up. I think it evolves constantly. The playbook I described does keep evolving as we face different challenges. We now work with much larger organisations than maybe we did when we started off, and I don't think necessarily the club model was designed around that. So we are adapting all the time in terms of how we work together, how we collaborate across the hub. So there is. The model adapts, but I don't think we'll ever deviate from that club model. I think it's so unique and so embedded in our culture. It really is. That is, and I guess.
No leadership journey is a straight line. No. So I can't imagine what they are, but there's got to have been some challenges and setbacks along the way for you.
Yeah, I mean, if I think about the leadership journey, certainly, and I think. One of the biggest challenges has been those much larger clients that are larger than a club is typically no more than about 90 people. We now have clients at And that we have more than 90 people from And working on that client. That brings with it huge challenge. We need to work out how we work together as different clubs across hubs, across the entirety of And. And that brings its own challenges. Yes, we've got our own common culture and our own common ways of working across the business, but each club is unique. Each club has its own style, each club has its own culture, its own vision, its own mission, its own types of clients it wants to work for, as I described. And I think that is probably one of the biggest challenges we have, is how as leaders across And, we compromise and we agree how we're going to work together on some of those clients. And I think that's probably been the biggest challenge, I think.
And what's the kind of frequency of interaction between the leaders of each club? How do you come together, and how is that organised and arranged so that that effective oversight across the business takes place?
I think that's probably changed a little bit over the past couple of years. The hubs are now critical to how we operate, and within each hub there is an exec who is responsible for all of the leaders within that hub, and we come together at least once a week to talk about our operational challenges, to talk about clients, to talk about the people we have and some of those challenges. And I think we've really fostered over the last year or so a real good camaraderie across the Scotland and Yorkshire hub. So we all look out for each other. We are, there is an adversarial aspect to us wanting to do as well as each other or do better than each other, but we're all in it again for collective good as well. So I think that's really driven that.
Now, I mean, I could sit and talk and ask questions all day, but I'm hoping our audience are sat very still, but I'm hoping that people have felt able to scan the QR code on the seat in front and ask a few questions. So I'm going to go to the audience questions here. So I've got first one. Where do you personally see yourself in 5 years' time?
That's such a tough question. Thank you for that one, whoever set that. I think it's really difficult to know where you'll be in 5 years' time. And to be fair, this is something that I ask people in their performance appraisals, and we look at their long-term goals. I mean, for me, I'm really happy at the moment in my role. I'm really comfortable with growing and supporting the club that I'm in, and does support mobility though. So and it's actively encouraged. We don't want our leaders to get stale in a role that they've been performing for 3, 4, 5 years. So I don't really know what's next for me in the next 5 years. I know I'm happy at the moment, but I think there's definitely a role for me in And somewhere, whether that's working in a different hub, or whether that's working in a completely different role, that might be around looking after some of our enterprise level clients, for example.
Questions are coming in thick and fast. So we've got one here. What was your route to being MD of And?
So yeah, I mean,
we talked about And, but how did you get there?
I mean, I could start right at the beginning with my stabilizers on my bike, but that's probably a bit too far back. But yeah, I think, I mean, I've worked in digital now for the best part of 25 years. I was just speaking, before this event, before we started, just how I accidentally kind of ended up in digital after, trying to get a career designing cars in engineering. But that's another story. But yeah, I've worked in digital all that time. At first, I was a hands-on front-end developer. I moved into client services, so looking after how we engaged with, how we sold to, how we delivered for clients. Joined And 3.5 years ago to head up our service team, who look after our client relationships, and then took this promotion 18 months ago to kind of head up and be the managing director of Club Spark.
And great question here around human interaction. We know the workplace and how the workplace operates has changed. But do you miss the human interactions now there are more people working from home? It's not the same on Teams, is it?
It really isn't the same on Teams, no, or Google or Zoom, or whichever flavour of app you use. I think I was chatting to Earl about this before we started. I think one of the hardest things for me is that for those junior people who've just joined the business, graduated, I think it's really hard to recreate the kind of environment we had pre-COVID, where those water cooler moments or just overhearing a conversation, you'd be able to help and support people. Having to put a deliberate meeting in someone's diary is a real barrier to learning. I think we're trying to find that right balance still of, giving people that flexibility of working from home, but also encouraging people to come in and to be really collaborative in the office. And I think that balance is hard, right?
And I mean, who knew that you're on mute would become such a commonly used phrase?
So many pounds in the pot.
Really good question here around leadership and how can effective leadership accelerate the journey to net zero and reducing carbon emissions?
That's a really good question. I think we do take those commitments quite seriously, and we have in fact we have a committee who are responsible for monitoring our emissions and making sure that we are driving towards net zero. I think there's a real focus on that in the organisation. So as a leadership team, we are there to support that initiative, which comes from And as a whole, I think, and. From Club Spark specifically, we are always looking at ways that we can reduce our carbon footprint, encouraging people to use public transport or alternative modes of transport, and encouraging people not to travel just for the sake of it, but to make sure that they're doing things sensibly.
Okay, last couple of questions then, Jim. So, really good one, this. Can you teach? I mean, there are so many leadership and management books, programs, podcasts, but can you teach anyone to be a good leader?
I think you can. I mean, it's funny you should ask that. I mean, I very much see myself as an accidental leader. I didn't choose a leadership path; it chose me, if that makes sense. And I think that's true for a lot of people. You end up getting into a more senior role, and you are accidentally leading a team. I've had to read books, I've had to have training, I've had to look at, what kind of leader I want to be. I think absolutely those things can be taught.
And actually what I've found personally is that the more opportunities you have like this, or for delivering leadership and management programs, that actually allows you more time for reflection. Yeah. And that sort of really helps too. Great question. Mental health and well-being, really, really, big priority for employers at the moment. How do you develop mental toughness in a leadership role?
I think in a leadership role specifically, it can be tough. It can be a very lonely place being a leader. You can feel that you don't want to share, that you don't want to show any vulnerability as a leader. I think I've learned over time that being able to show vulnerability and show humility, I think is really, really important. It certainly is to me, at least, and I encourage that from my management team as well, in terms of making sure that those types of behaviours are really encouraged.
Absolutely. The final question, and perhaps my favourite: how do you get a job with And?
Yeah, well, visit and.digital and see what careers are open.
Okay, what we always do on the podcast is final question to our guests. You know, it's great when you get to this stage. You know, you were young in the early 90s, you said. But if you could go back and send a text to your younger self and give your teenage self one piece of advice, what would it be?
As I said earlier, you know, I started off thinking I wanted a career designing cars, and I didn't even know what the difference between designing a car and engineering a car was. I ended up at Sunderland University, having failed A-level maths on an engineering course, trying to compete in engineering level maths. And I think I was probably too focused on, you know, having where I wanted to be. And I think my simple text to myself would be, you know, don't over plan, just the plan will find you. So that would be my text to myself. And the other thing I'll probably say is stop smoking sooner.
Well, young people won't have a choice very soon, will they? So, Jim, thank you so much. Can we put our hands together and thank you very, very much.